Waterlog. Today we're going to talk all about jawfish and dragonets. Okay, let's get started talking about our jawfish and our dragonets. Right, so we're going to break them down into two categories just because they're two different groups of fish, but they're relatively small groups of fish, which is why I'm putting them together in this one video. So first off, our jawfish. That's kind of a tongue twister. So there's not really that many jawfish that are popular in the hobby. There's only a small handful, but these two are the most popular ones that I typically see. So first off is the blue spot jawfish. They are characters. Now, if you do a quick search online, I'm sure you can find there's a hilarious video of a jawfish and a diamond goby just like throwing sand at each other. It's quite entertaining. I encourage you to go look that up. So they are sand sifters. That's one thing to keep in mind before purchasing them. Now, our next jawfish is going to be the yellow-headed pearly jawfish. So those are really the only two jawfish I have to talk about. Next up are going to be our dragonets, right? Sometimes you may have heard them called mandarin gobies or mandarin dragonets. So again, this is another small group of fish to talk about. First off is our red mandarin, then we have the green mandarin, and the spotted mandarin. Now, a lot of times you should be able to find some of those captive bred mandarins at your local fish store. I've seen some that are teeny tiny. It would fit on the size of a penny. So really small guys that are available if you look for them, but they are an advanced fish. Despite the fact that they're advanced, they are beautiful and all sorts of colorful, which makes them a very popular fish for people to keep in their reef tanks. Next up, when it comes to dragonets, is going to be the red and the brown scooter dragonet, right? So they're basically the same, just different colorations. You've got one that's brown and one that's red. Now, the last one that I want to talk about today is going to be the ruby red scooter dragonet. Now, these guys look very similar to that red and that brown, but again, they have that gorgeous dorsal fin with the ornate colors. It's just very bold and stands out. Now, these are relatively slow-moving fish that kind of cruise along in your reef tank. They're not going to get very big. They'll stay about 3 inches in size, so they're perfect to keep in some of those reef tanks that you have. 30 gallons will probably be about the right size. Now, when it goes to the jawfish, they do need a little bit larger of a system, but for both of them, you want to make sure that your system and your sand bed and your copepod populations are well established before you add either of these fish. All right, let's move on to the kitchen and talk about diet. But before we do, I want to hear what kind of jawfish you've ever kept, or if you've ever kept a mandarin. Let me know in the comments below. Okay, let's talk about the diet that jawfish and dragonets need. Now, we're going to do things a little bit differently today when it comes to their diet. While they are both carnivores, I'm going to keep them separate. We're going to do jawfish first, and then we're going to go over the diet for those dragonets. So, jawfish, as their name suggests, they have a pretty big mouth. They are going to be sand sifters, so they're going to be sifting through the sand. They're detritivores. They'll eat the things that they find in the sand. So that means any pellets that have fallen down, that have gone missed when it was feeding time, they are going to be taking care of those pellets. So any pellet that you would be feeding your reef tank, an overall community pellet like Thera A by New Life Spectrum, that's probably going to be good for them. They won't be too picky. Now, another option that you have for feeding is some of those gel and DIY foods. I talk about this every time, and I'm curious, please leave a comment below. Let me know if you have ever tried these gel or these DIY foods and what your favorite one is. I feel like they're very underutilized for the hobbyist, and I'm actually going to be making a video about how to use them a little bit later, but we'll just stick to talking briefly about them today. So New Life Spectrum makes a gel and a dough mix. They are really phenomenal products for adding in medications or just helping to get your fish a little bit of extra nutrients that they might need that maybe they're missing in their diet. And the way that these work, you can specifically target those fish and feed them. So this is really a great option. Next up is our frozen foods, and I really feel like a lot of the bulk of what these jawfish are going to eat is frozen. So first off is going to be Predator Blend Foods, right? Now, Rod's Food has this great Predator Blend. If you look at it, a lot of the pieces, though, are a little bit large. They're big, chunky, meaty foods, and that's fine. So before you feed this, I would recommend breaking off a piece and then chopping it up with a knife, getting those pieces a little bit smaller for those jawfish to eat. Now, if you don't want to get your hands messy when it comes to feeding the jawfish, you could also use something like Ocean Nutrition's Prime Reef. It's a great option if you don't want to get your hands messy. And again, this comes in those blister packs. You can just pop out whatever you need to feed them. Okay, that pretty much sums up when it comes to jawfish. So let's move on to our dragonets. Now, leave a comment below. Let me know if you have ever kept a dragonet, what their favorite thing was to eat. Okay. It comes to pellet food, I'm going to be completely honest with you. A lot of times, unless you've gotten a captive bred dragonet or mandarin, they're probably not going to eat pellets. But if they were, there's a good chance that they would probably be eating something like the Reef Nutrition TDO. It's a very small size pellet, so this would work. Something like the Coral Frenzy food that is for corals, but also for those smaller fish. This would be another option for you as well. Now, next up is going to be our frozen foods when it comes to our mandarins. These are probably going to be one of the smallest fish out there, or the fish out there with the smallest mouth that you have to feed. So think about what you're feeding, right? Number one option I would recommend is brine shrimp. There's a lot of different varieties of this out there on the market. This is just one of them. You could also get one of the Reef multi-packs. Again, some of these blister packs, they have foods that are a little bit smaller and are going to be great for those small mouths of the mandarins. Now, something to keep in mind when you're feeding the mandarins those frozen foods is you're going to want to make sure that something is going to be big enough for them to see, but small enough that it kind of escapes those other fish's eyes that are in your tank, right? Mandarins, as a group, are very, very, very slow eaters. They just kind of cruise and coast along the reef and along your rockwork, slowly picking at the different foods that they might find. So another thing that you can do when it comes to them picking out some of those smaller foods is having live foods already in there ready for them. Now, one thing with mandarins, they're not a beginner fish, not at all, but they're very, very popular. So if your tank isn't old enough to have an established population of live copepods, there's some things that you can do to help establish that population. There's a bunch of different companies that are out there that make those live copepods. So right here we've got these Tisbee pods. That's great. Reef Nutrition has a whole line of different kind of pods. We get the Tigger pods and our Apex pods. Now, if you are thinking of going this route, keep in mind that when you're feeding an aquarium, if you've got, say, for example, a 55-gallon tank, you're probably going to need 2 of these bottles, and then you're going to continue to need to seed that population every month and a half to 2 months, because as the population is growing, those mandarins are cruising along the reef, eating some of those copepods and diminishing the population. So you want to make sure that you keep adding to that. Another thing that you can do is you can add one of the pod habitats that we've talked about in the previous videos. We'll link to that below. And that is going to be a good way for helping to establish your pod population. One last thing that you can do when it comes to those live copepods is when you are cleaning out your tank, I don't know if you have filter socks or filter floss or pads, whatever, take things out really slowly, right? A little bit, and then go through your filter floss or those socks and look for the copepods. You can pick those out really gently with your fingers and toss them back into the tank. That way you're not getting rid of any of those population of pods. All right, that's all I got to talk about when it comes to diet and nutrition. Let's head up and talk about some of the issues that they might encounter. Like the rest of this video, I'm going to keep these in 2 separate categories of the dragonets and the jawfish. But let's get started with those jawfish. So, like all of the gobies that we talked about in the last episode, jawfish are jumpers. They can clear the tank if given the option, so you want to make sure that you have a good, nice fitting lid on your tank. There's a bunch of kits out there on the market for the type of tank that you have. If it didn't come with the tank, there's DIY kits, a whole bunch of different things. Check out the Marine Depot website. They definitely have several options for you. Okay, additionally, kind of like the scobies from last video is the sand is really important. You're not going to want to put a jawfish in a new setup tank. You're going to want to make sure that you give that sand bed time to mature and to establish itself before you put those jawfish in, because they are sand sifters. That's a really important part of their life. Now, also with the sand bed, you want to make sure that it's deep enough for them. They do like to have their burrows, so having several inches that they can dig into is important. Next up, when it comes to our dragonets, I mentioned in the kitchen that having a live supply of food readily available for them is really important. They are super slow eaters. Like I said, they're always slowly moving along the reef, picking at foods that they might find. And when it comes to mandarins, I know so many people who have had terrible issues with their mandarins starving to death just because they weren't getting enough food. So make sure that you have enough food in there. And if you're worried whether or not you have some, you can seed, but you can also add one of those pod habitats that we talked about earlier to help entice that population to grow even larger. Next, when it comes to different things that you can do to help keep your fish healthy, is making sure they have good water quality. Now, this goes for every single kind of fish out there, not just these jawfish and dragonets. Now, to do that, I like to recommend that you do regular water testing. You don't have to do water changes. You might not need it, but at least if you're testing your water, you're going to know that something is wrong. All right, let's talk a little bit about enrichment. I really like enrichment as a way to help your fish live their best lives by changing up their environment. It doesn't have to be anything big. You could change up the different types of copepods that you're feeding your mandarins, or the different type of food that you're feeding those jawfish. Now, one cool thing when it comes to jawfish and feeding enrichment is a lot of people I know like to turn off their pumps when they're feeding. Makes sense, you don't want to waste any food, but you could leave your power heads on and put some food in the flow of the power head, and that is going to give your jawfish something fun to chase around the tank, right? In addition to your other fish who I'm sure will enjoy that as well. Now, something that you could also do if you have a Fowler tank, or if you have a coral tank that you can easily move around, is moving around some of those rocks. Give them access to different parts of the tank. Just be careful, you don't want to make sure that you squish anybody. All right, the last method of enrichment, as always, is tank mates, right? So one big thing when it comes to jawfish, you don't want to have more than one, and you don't want to mix them. They do not get along with each other. And the same goes for those mandarins. Typically, one in a tank is going to be all you need. That being said, they are very peaceful fish, and they do well in community tanks, so they're going to get along with a lot of the fish that you might already have in your reef tank or are thinking about putting in your reef tank. But before you buy your fish, make sure you do your research. Nothing is a substitute for being well prepared before buying fish. And you can check out Marine Depot's website, look for that fish compatibility chart, or you can always go online and ask some friends and do your own research. All right, I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. Let me know what you thought about it down in the comments. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time.